Very good. So let's get started. Nature loss is now formally defined as a national risk in Norway. The Nature Risk Commission has made it very clearly that ecosystems across the country, including northern Norway, are increasingly stressed by land use change, climate actions, and by biodiversity loss. And this isn't just an environmental risk. It is also a material risk to industries, to communities, and to supply chains that rely on stable natural systems. That is precisely what we are going to be discussing today. Industries can contribute by sharing data, by reducing negative impacts, can also by financing innovative solutions, including nature-positive solutions, and also by collaborating across. So today we are going to be discussing how can industry come more together and collaborate to reduce biodiversity loss. My name is Laura Victoria Mejia. I work in Equinor. I have a role as a vice president for corporate sustainability with responsibility on environment. I am very happy to welcome you all to this event that we are hosting. And we're doing that with some industry leaders, scientists, also NGOs that are going to be collaborating with us throughout. So how we have set up this session, if we move to the next slide. So the first 40 minutes is going to be a round of introductions and sharing perspectives to the topics. You are going to be hearing from the Norwegian Environmental Agency, from the research of Institute of Marine Research in Norway, also from the Norwegian Institute of Nature Research, and from Equinor. We are going to be taking around 40 minutes to that part, and then we go into a panel debate approximately at 14:15. That panel debate is going to be led by Solurum Shellum, who is the Chief Development Officer at the Institute for Water Research in Norway. And we are planning to close around 15. Since I am already on stage and being the host for this event, then we will start by sharing Equinor perspectives. So let's get started. This topic is of importance to us. We see that nature is taking a larger stage on the climate discussions, and this is because it's an acknowledgement that the nature loss is as urgent as the climate crisis, and that the two are interlinked. We see that the legislation is moving forward after the Kunming-Montreal Agreement in 2022, that now some people call it the Paris Agreement for Nature. There was this goal established of halt of and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. The legislation since has rise when it comes to environment. Some examples are, of course, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. We also see the upcoming Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. We see legislation coming on our way when it comes to methane emissions, with water, waste shipment regulations, and none less, the Norwegian government sets very clear expectations to companies owned by the state on that they should have both targets and goals to reduce negative impacts and also contribute more positively to biodiversity. So that is a little bit around the context for us in Equinor. And then you might be wondering, what is our approach? I like to show this video, and let's hope it works nicely, that illustrate our approach quite well. This is from our Empire Wind project in New York. You probably have heard of it. It makes it lately a lot to the news. And it is quite a good example of how we are using some methods to understand our interaction with ecosystems and how we make informed decisions. In the case of this project, this method was used to lay down the electrical cables. And it is quite nice. For us, every project is required to perform an environmental impact assessment and also to establish monitoring programs. This way, we do both things. We aim to minimize our impacts on the environment, and also we make de-risking the value of the projects. We are quite conscious that we can do more when it comes to how we are mitigating our impacts, and therefore are working on that. It's something around always doing better. Yes, and Equinor supports the global ambition to revert nature loss by 2030, and we have governance in place for that. So we have our biodiversity position, which is from 2021. In that biodiversity position, we speak to our aim to develop a net positive approach that we reiterate on our environmental policy. And our goal is then to use precautionary approach, also to use the mitigation hierarchy to mitigate negative impacts. For example, pollution is a very relevant one for us, and also to increase the footprint of nature positive impacts with targeted actions to conserving, for example, birds or marine ecosystems. And we are making progress. You will see that we have developed the methodologies and have a robust research portfolio. We are going to be sharing some examples today with some of the partners we are working with, whom are here represented today. For example, we have the marine kelp restoration pilot at Melkojesund that we are doing in collaboration with Havsforsknings Institute and also with the Hammerfest Kommune. The second example is from the Kittiwake hotels at Rost in Lofoten. This is a NINA research that we are contributing to. You will be hearing also from Tuna on this. We have the example also with regards to the marine programs at Empire Wind. Empire Wind is our first project to have these positive impact plans in place. It includes marine monitoring in the long term and also, for example, oyster restoration sites. And our headquarters, like in Forest East and Forest West in Stavanger, we have monitoring programs for birds. In addition, we have developed all site-specific inventories. This is mapping key biodiversity features around our operated assets or sites and considering positive measures for it. You will be hearing some more examples from us, from my colleague Ida Maria. And for now, I just would like to say that these examples make us very proud, but that we continue searching for how to make a positive impact. And I see my colleague Alessandro is telling me that I'm running out of time. So now I would like to welcome Øystein Leiknes from the Norwegian Environmental Agency that's going to be talking to us about the road pathway to and the ambitions for nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so I decided to name my talk "What are the ambitions and how to get there?" In this talk, I will present some of the policies that has been implemented and how Norway will follow up some of the new obligations that is following the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. So there are a lot of documents and a lot of decisions that has been made by the various governments that fulfill the international agreements and show how Norway is trying to fulfill these obligations. Some of them are listed on the slide above. Outside of the baseline, Norway have developed what we call marine management plans. They are set in place in order to clarify the overall framework, enhance coordination and clear priorities in ocean management. The Norwegian management plans has celebrated its 20 years since the first one was adopted, and the last one was adopted in 2024. So we are now in the process of putting together the scientific base for the next marine management plan that will come in 2028. So the marine management plan have a dual objective. So it's both to promote value creation through sustainable use of marine resources and ecosystem services. And at the same time, they contribute to maintaining ecosystem structure, functioning, and productivity and biodiversity. They increase the predictability and they facilitate coexistence between ocean industries and activities and between the nature. As you can see from this map, we are talking about large sea areas. So under the frame of the marine management plans, mapping and monitoring has been further developed. We have gathered information on everything from climate, hydrography, biota, and many different species through various groups and through monitoring and mapping programs. Pollution and other pressures from human activities are also compiled and made available as the scientific base for the marine management plans. That information is being used for deciding the overall frames, for instance, for petroleum activities. Other measures are followed up under the various sector legislation. This scientific base for the marine management plan is made publicly available, and it's of great importance that when one is planning for new activities in the sea, for instance, ocean wind farms and open ocean aquaculture, that the same scientific base can be used also for other purposes. I'll then go a little bit more into detail concerning some of the following up after the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. As already mentioned, the global target is well known. By 2030, 30% of all areas are to be effectively conserved and managed. For the marine areas, Norway did not agree on a national target for the marine areas. The government of Norway plans to fulfill the obligations in the Kunming-Montreal Agreement, both by establishing protection areas, but also to use what we call other effective area-based conservation measures, also named as OSCMs. So there is some continued work on a further assessment in order to clarify which marine areas can be reported as OSCMs. And the Norwegian Environment Agency has been tasked to lead the work to clarify this. In addition to this, the Norwegian Environment Agency has been tasked to lead the work to compile what we call the necessary environmental knowledge base in cooperation with leading scientific institutions to identify new candidate areas for marine protection, with the aim to contribute to Target 3. From the 1st of January this year, the Marine Protection Act came into force, which is the legal basis for MPAs, or marine protected areas, outside of the territorial waters. And this legislation applies to the whole Norway's 200-mile economic zone and continental shelf. In addition to new possibilities in the open ocean, there is also ongoing conservation processes related to marine protected areas along the Norwegian coast. And that work is continued. Another important goal in the Kunming-Montreal agreement is the target 2 to restore degraded ecosystems. So for Norway, there is a target. The global target is to ensure that by 2030, at least 30% of areas of degraded terrestrial, inland water, and marine and coastal ecosystems are under effective restoration in order to enhance biodiversity and ecosystem functions and services, ecological integrity and connectivity. There is an overall national target that by 2030, the extent of degraded and destroyed natural areas in Norway are documented, and restoration initiatives have been strengthened and implemented in areas where co-benefits for society at large is deemed the highest. So to follow up this target, the Norwegian Environment Agency has been tasked to follow up the action plan for the Oslo Fjord, which is to be considered as a huge restoration project. We are also working on guidance for the local communities and following up existing grant schemes on this same topic. In addition to that, I could also mention that the Environment Agency also contributes to the task on restoration of kelp forests in cooperation with the Fisheries Directorate and the Institute of Marine Research and others. So in order to summarize, the Norwegian marine management plans facilitate the monitoring and mapping that has been and can be used for many different purposes, including new industrial activities. I would also summarize by saying that there is a lot of ongoing work that will contribute to the protection of and restoration of areas in the Norwegian marine waters. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
You were spot on time. Thank you, Øystein. And now we are going to be hearing from Tone Kristin Reitzen, representing the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research. She is going to be talking about MARSIS.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. I want to start with some very big questions. How can knowledge of cumulative impact be used in marine spatial planning? And how can we aid decision makers and planners to use this? And how can we compile and make available all the good knowledge that already exists and all the data that exists? So today I'm going to present how we have solved this in the project called MARSIS, which is a research project funded by the Norwegian Research Council, how we have solved exactly these questions. A bit too many things to hold on to here. So MARSIS has been a collaborative research project between science, industry, management, and NGOs. And the total collaboration has included actually 24 different institutions and organizations. And Equinor, who is the host of this, has been strongly involved and a very active contributor. So, to the big question that arose. The main thing here is how can we minimize the effects of marine industry on seabirds. Seabirds are very complex, a bird group. They are also very successful because they have actually conquered both land, sea, and the marine environment. But still, they are the most threatened vertebrates in the world. And the situation in Norway is not better. Actually, more than half of all the monitored populations are declining. The causes for these are many. It's climate change, fishery, pollution, you name it. But it's actually the sum of all this that adds up and needs to be accounted for. And in more recent years, you know, the industrial developments and activities out at sea is also increasing, with the potential to add more negative impacts on these vulnerable birds. And at the same time, we do need more energy, we do need more food, so we need to take up more space out at sea. So then how can this almost impossible trade-off between increased demand of use of more space at sea, and how can we also avoid more negative impact on seabirds? How can we meet this? Yeah. So the question then, can we turn the tide and twist the arrow completely around? That seems impossible, but it could be done. But that requires some completely changes. So more use. So the question is, how can more use lead to more positive impact on seabirds, and can we achieve this as a sustainable coexistence? To do that, we actually need to compile all the information we have, and we need information on the population level to inform the management. And as I said, seabirds are very complex. They are long-lived, they are migratory birds, and they are affected in many different ways, both on land and on seas, and so on. But at the same time, it's at the colony level where we identify the different the declines, and it's at the colony level where we actually collect all the data. We collect data on population changes, and we collect data on where the birds are when they're out at sea through tracking devices. And in Norway, we have quite good information of this through national monitoring programs of CPOP and SeaTrack, which provides data on annual changes in population size and annual changes in where they are at sea when they're not in the colony. So we need to link all this, both the distribution data and the population data that we can find in these colonies. And in MARSIS, we have actually done that. We have compiled all this information. We have used the Halpen framework as a basis, and we have compiled maps of specific seabird populations, year-round distributions, maps of the stressor activities, of fishery activity, energy extraction, and so on, and even ocean warming. And then we have further developed the Halpen to quantify the impacts of each seabird populations of 6 different seabird species in Norwegian waters. And then we have estimated both cumulative and single stressor impacts, achieved through state-of-the-art modeling frameworks. And all this is then put together in an interactive web-based tool, which we call the MARSIS tool, which can be found on the MARSIS webpage. So from this, we have also gathered quite a lot of new knowledge, both about cumulative impact, but also on the different single stressors. So you can find information in this tool about impact of offshore wind farms on migratory birds, which is migrating across waters during the migration season. And you can find information on how the different stressors, both cumulatively and single, is affecting seabirds. And we have made available some knowledge briefs where you can read more about the new publications that is coming out from this, both on migratory birds and also on the different stressors like bycatch, offshore wind, and climate. You can find them by following the QR codes that you see on this slide. So then, what can we use a tool like this for? Firstly, it links multiple sources of data and information, and you get knowledge of impacts during the annual cycle and knowledge of the cumulative impacts on seabirds. This makes it possible to bridge the gap between data, knowledge, and users. Secondly, it is a tool that informs sustainable marine spatial planning. It informs both management, industry, and NGOs, and it is an openly accessible tool. This makes it possible to plan for developments in areas where seabirds are not directly affected, or you can even plan for marine protected areas. So this may turn the tide by using this tool. It makes sure that we do not add more pressure on a group of species that already is moving towards extinction. And this is especially important when moving from fossil to renewable energy, since the effect from climate change is one of the most harmful impacts on these birds. And thirdly, the tool has a great potential to be further developed. The frameworks can be further developed and used for other purposes, for instance, environmental impact assessments. And the knowledge and information of this tool can be used to inform or linked to other cumulative impact assessment tools that is already being developed. So if you want to try out the tool, you can follow the QR code you see there, and you find a link to the tool. So please do that. And also, there is more information about the project and all the people who has been involved. So a lot of people being involved in this. Thank you all for the attention.
Thank you, Tuna. Now you are going to be listening to the last speaker on the round of introductions. It's Hans Christian Strand. He is representing the Institute of Marine Research, Havsforskningsinstitut, and you are going to be talking about seaweed restoration. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, the kelp forests are among the most productive and species-rich ecosystems in the world, and they underpin ecosystem services valued at about 7 billion Norwegian kronas in the Norwegian ecosystems. So among these, as habitat for at least 12 commercial species. An estimated 5,000 square kilometers have been lost due to sea urchin grazing. And today I'm going to tell you why this happened, what we have learned from restoration research, and also what, not least, what industry can do to help recovery. After the Second World War, coastal fishery were exceptionally good, partly because of the wartime pause, but mostly due to a big buildup of fishing capacity, which caused the fisheries to increase the landings, even though the underlying stocks were in decline. But this can only go on for a while, and after a while, then several of these coastal stocks started to collapse. And rebuilding coastal stocks that has collapsed from scratch is extremely difficult, even if you stop fishing entirely, and especially difficult if this also causes the sea urchins to bloom, and destroying the kelp forests that the predators depend on for feeding or as nursery areas. So once lost, it's very difficult to rebuild them. So since the main cause is loss of predators, it makes sense to introduce new ones. So we can start with the most efficient predators of them all. It's us humans. And kelp sea urchins are actually a commercially valuable product. But on these sea urchin barrens, they are in a starving situation and contains too little roe to be commercially interesting. They can be harvested and fed for about 12 weeks to reach commercial value. But this method still struggles for the commercial breakthrough. But if they succeed, it can be a self-financed recovery machine. And of course, given that it also restores the kelp fishery. Another predator you can use is to smash these sea urchins with a hammer, underwater hammer, and kill them. And of course, this will reliably produce kelp forest, but it doesn't scale. But the method that does scale is quicklime. Quicklime is toxic when it comes to water, briefly, especially to sea urchins, and before it turns back into ordinary lime again. And in Porsangerfjorden, we have restored enormous areas with using quicklime. And this is how it looks after the restoration. But we have also used it other places and just been complete failures. So the method is not fully developed. As a complement to, or in addition to human predators, we can introduce natural predators. In Porsangerfjorden, the reason it was successful was because of the buildup of predators. As this recent video shows from the Porsangerfjord, it was a buildup of the sea urchins are ready to expand again into the restored areas, but are held in check by the king crab. So the king crab not only hinders the sea urchins from eating the kelp forest again, but also went into these other areas that hadn't been limed and removed the sea urchins. So we have a lot of kelp coming back in this area. But it is blacklisted and invasive, so it cannot be used deliberately to solve the problems elsewhere. But luckily, we do have an alternative. The wolfish, Atlantic wolfish, also feed heavily on sea urchins. And in the outer coast areas, there have been a population increase these last years. And together with Equinor and Hammerfest municipality, we are testing translocation of these to the sea urchins parents in the Hammerfest area. And if successful, then we have already restarted this rebuilding of this predator population. So here we can see them released in the Melkesund outside Hammerfest. And these experiments will be followed up this year. Also, we need to develop new tools. If we can recreate or establish nursery areas for juvenile fish without removing the sea urchin first, that will be very helpful. And we have developed these kelp reefs also in cooperation with Equinor and local industry and municipalities that grow. They grow completely with kelp. They can be inoculated in the lab or in naturally. And we see that in less than 4 months, we have a full operative kelp forest in the system, even without removing the sea urchin first. And also, they are interconnected. So these kelp gates are used by the fish the fish juveniles to travel between the kelp units, as can be seen in this video. So this is juveniles moving between kelp units. So finally, how can industry contribute? If restoration is going to be meaningful and have an impact, it must scale to near shore or fjord level. And that is extremely difficult. Scaling is extremely difficult. And also that is where industry excels and where scientists and NGOs often don't. So any contribution to this phase is, of course, essential and very important. So one, we do have some promising methods that can contribute to restored kelp forests and increased biodiversity. But two, none of them are, for the time being, mature enough to be implemented at a full scale. But nevertheless, they also represent an opportunity, each of them, for a concrete possibility to accelerate the restoration process. If combined with industrial capabilities and long-term commitment and partnerships. So that was actually what I had. So I see.
Thank you very much, Hans Christian. Then we're going to be concluding the first part of this session. That was the introductory part where we listened to some of the solutions. I'll give the word now to Solurum. She's going to be then leading the panel.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yes, I do have a microphone. This is kind of a trap. Let's see. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very nice to be here. Before we zoom in on these wonderful 4 panelists, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So in 2019, IPES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, sounded the alarm for biodiversity. Natural ecosystems have declined by nearly 50%. Approximately 25% of species are threatened by extinction. And a little over 80% of the biomass of wild mammals have gone out. These are dramatic numbers. And one of the co-chairs of this report said quite eloquently, the essential interconnected web of life on Earth is getting smaller and it frayed, meaning it unravels. And humans are the reason for this. It's been mentioned a few times, but let's just repeat it. The 5 key drivers of biodiversity loss, the changes in land and sea use, fishing or exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species. So it was high tide to turn the tide on biodiversity loss. And 3 years later, the world did. The leaders of the world approved the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It has a 2050 vision to make sure we have a world living in harmony with nature. And it has a 2030 mission to get us to the 2050 vision. That says that we have to take urgent action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and put us on a path to recovery. There are 23 goals backing up this mission, and Øystein touched upon a few of them before. But here's the trick for the oceans. The countries that govern, or the countries that sign this agreement, they govern about 1/3 of the oceans. 64% of the oceans are no man's oceans, or so-called areas beyond national jurisdiction. Unfortunately, a year later, the High Seas Treaty was approved after 20 years of negotiations. And the countries again came together to agree on how we can collectively manage all of the oceans and protect all of the ecosystems in the oceans. And just a few weeks ago, this treaty went into force. So now we really have international mechanisms that have the potential to protect biodiversity. And in parallel with this, we have seen corporate nature actions increase. And we have seen some really good examples today. But is it enough? What is the role of industry in taking care of biodiversity? And how can they contribute positively? That's what we'll discuss today. But let's do a quick global status check first. In 2025, EI published its first Global Nature Action Barometer. It had checked 435 countries from around the world. 93% of them mention nature in their disclosure. That's pretty good. But only 26% of them align with TNFD's recommendations to assess, report, and act on their nature-related dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities. So in another way, nature is on the radar. It has entered the boardroom in some companies, but there is a way to go. And another benchmark from the Nature Benchmark they have been assessing companies for 7 years now. And they look at the companies with really heavy impact on nature. And the 750 companies that are on that list now, they score on average 17 out of 100 points. And top scorer is Puma with 56. Sit with that for a second. 17 out of 100 points. There is a long way to go. But there's good news coming out of the Nature Benchmark as well. Improvements are within reach, the methods are in place, frameworks are in place, and they also point to the fact that sustainability legislation is really driving change in Europe, and European companies have become front runners. And best practices are emerging, such as nature transition plans with specific goals, and that was also mentioned by you, Laura, at the beginning as obligatory in some areas. And one of these best practices is also the famous mitigation hierarchy. How many know the mitigation hierarchy in this group? About half, that's pretty good. So it says that you have to avoid negative impacts. What you cannot avoid, you need to minimize. What you cannot minimize, you have to restore. And what you cannot restore, you should offset. And if you do well, you should offset more so that you get to some sort of net gain. And around the world, this mitigation hierarchy is typically used by companies with really high impact on biodiversity. But in Norway, it's obligatory for most companies. On land and in the coastal zone, it's obligatory to use it. Offshore, it's only partially obligatory. But mitigation is weak, or compliance with the hierarchy is still fairly weak. There are barriers to get over to actually be able to use it properly. So we have a way to go, but how can industry contribute positively? Today is February 2nd, 2026. We have less than 4 years to halt and reverse biota loss. Is it mission impossible? Can we do it? And what can industry do to get us there? And with that, I welcome the panel of 4 people. Vicky Geri, where are you? You're there. And Maria, who's over here, and Ida Maria. Please get up on the stage. And while they sort of get in place, you can sit over there, and I'll go a little bit more over here. Can you raise your hand if you're from another country than Norway or work for an international organization? It's almost 50%. And take them down again. If you're from a company, can you raise your hand? That's less. If you're from an NGO, raise your hand. About the same as companies. So what about researchers? That's the majority, unsurprisingly, but that's how we know. So now you know the context. You were talking to a pretty good mixture of national and international participants and a lot of researchers. Do you have room? Okay, let me go over here. So let's start by presenting these eminent people. We have Ida over at the end, Ida Maria Evensen. She works for Equinor. She's been there for 2 years. She has a master in environmental biotechnology. She came from the Norwegian Environment Agency and has worked with pretty much anything biodiversity in her time in the agency. A lot of experience, and is now part of the impact management team and consenting team at Equinor. And then we have Geri Larsson Fedde. He's the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy CEO at Hurtigruten, with over 40 years of experience in the maritime industry. He's been a commanding officer and a captain in the Norwegian Navy, and has had several leading positions for cruise companies, as well as the Norwegian Hydrographic Services, which is part of the mapping authority in Norway. And you say about yourself that you work with continuous improvement and sustainability. I love hearing those 2 words in the same sentence, continuous improvement and sustainability. That's what we're talking about. And then Vicky Lee Valgren. She's worked over 20 years at World Wildlife Fund, director of their Global Arctic Program, leads a core team of senior specialists and mobilizes the network to deliver on WWF's regional Arctic strategy. And last but not least, we have Maria Pettersvik Arvenes. She's a marine biologist from NTNU. She also has extensive experience in environmental management. She's also worked in the Norwegian Environmental Agency and is a consultant in SALT, but she's now working for the Norwegian Fishermen's Association. She's done that since 2021. She works on coexistence between fisheries and other industries and many other issues as well. So these 4 people have over 100 years of experience with the oceans and biodiversity, so give them a hand before we start. Okay, so we heard a little bit about Equinor already, so we're going to give the other 3 organizations a chance to say a little bit about them. So basically, what is the core business of your organization, and how do you work with or for biodiversity issues? And we're starting with you, Geri.
Thank you. You made me sound very old when you said older, but anyway.
Experience is the word.
I joined Hurtigruten about 5 years ago. In March, it will be 5 years. Hurtigruten has always been a bit in the forefront of our industry in trying to operate as sustainable as we can. It is an industry which we are the first to admit that hasn't only done good, and we need to fix that. And I think that's one of the strategies of Hurtigruten, is to try and show and be kind of a light or a leading light for the rest of the industry and what can be done and how we should get there where we need to go for as a company and as an industry. I think Hurtigruten has a very special place in Norway because we've been around for 132 years. We're operating 10 ships, predominantly on the Norwegian coast. I'm sure most of you have seen our ships. They are red and black, and there's one in today called Midnattssol, and she's a little smaller than the other one that's in here today. And we're very focused on, taking care of the local communities, making sure that we can operate our ships for another 100 years. But in order to do so, we need to change something. And I think that's kind of the way we're thinking and the way we're approaching sustainability and biodiversity and the way we operate our ships.
Wonderful. Vicky?
Thank you. When we were preparing for this panel, you told me as well to go big and not only be thinking Norwegian, not even necessarily thinking Arctic. So I'm taking a global perspective here, and coming from WWF. You mentioned this as well, but I just have to say this. I mean, where we're coming from, and from a biodiversity perspective, over the course of my life, populations of vertebrates across the world, the sizes of them have decreased on average 70%. 70% population sizes have decreased. Just think about that if you put that into terms of like human world, right? Population of Norway decreases by 70%. Workforce of Hurtigruten decreased by 70%. I mean, just think about the resources, the capacity, the innovation, the diversity, all of these things, how much weaker it is. And globally, in my life, 70% on average. And that's different in different parts of the world. In some places, freshwater systems have decreased the most. In South America, it's decreased by over 90% over these 40 years. So this is where we're coming from, right? And greatly hailing the Global Biodiversity Framework and the new High Seas Treaty as you were saying, frameworks now for us to turn this around where we have global commitment to do this, right? We need to do this, and an incredibly ambitious goal of by 2030 to see that change coming around. From WWF side, we work closely with many companies to see how we can make that change, right? And really how you can make that transformative change. But I'll be really honest with you, when I see this title, how can industry positively contribute to biodiversity? Honestly, it's quite easy for them to contribute positively in some way. But it's the question that you are asking is it enough? And how much are each of us doing, and is it enough? By company, by sector, by the industry. But as the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework, also says, is that this is a societal commitment that we've made, right? So when I'm talking about are we doing enough? Yes, here in this room and what we're talking about right now, it's industry, but it's also then connected to us in civil society, it's local communities, it's governments. Are we together doing enough? Because sure, it's easy to do some things to impact positively, right? But that's not what we need if we want to be changing from this decline of 70% over the past 45 years.
Do you want to say a little bit about how WWF works with Nature Action, or to foster and promote change?
Oh my goodness. That's what we do. That's everything that we do.
You need a few hours to respond, right?
I mean, again, in this context, it is very much trying to see with industry. If we look at that aspect, right, and how we are working with industry to see how we can be doing this, talking with them, and it's all of that mitigation hierarchy that you're talking about, right, and helping them. And this is interesting because over the past few years, in the past, we've been working with a lot of industry around climate change. There's been a lot of activity and momentum towards that. They've all been pressed towards, delivering towards the science-based targets, very quantitative, very easy for us to do that. We got the Paris Agreement, things are happening, there's momentum going on. And then comes this, there's another crisis out there, a biodiversity crisis. And all of a sudden we start getting these phone calls and saying, guys, how do we do this? What does that mean? What does that look like? Can you help us? And so this has been really a big work over the past few years, because the problem is that the natural system and trying to measure impacts on biodiversity is so much more complex. And trying to find those easy indicators, those easy things are so complex. And there's no, one size fits all, which makes it really difficult for industry. It makes it really difficult for governments and legislation to be able to, to push that in the right directions. So this is very much what we're doing, right? And working together with different industries, examples, case studies in different places. What can we do? What can we learn in this place, in that specific context, in this specific industry or that sector, right? Looking at that, working together with researchers to see what can we develop? What are there, these science-based targets for nature? How can we do that? How can we try to, at a broader level, try to help and influence that, to help people? And then, of course, it's that lobbying and going to governments and trying to get them as well to see, we need your guys' help to create those systems and those incentives or deterrents, whichever way you want to look at it, to get people working in. So we're at all these different levels.
Wonderful. Thank you. Maria.
Thanks. Oh, it's not working.
Yes.
Okay. How we work. First, I just thought I would tell a little bit about the Norwegian fishing industry. There's about 10,000 fishers in Norway. We have around 5,000 vessels. And these vessels and fishers fished around 2.3 million tons of fish in Norwegian waters last year. So it's quite a lot. If you divide it into 10,000 people, it's some kilos per person. So we are broad member organizations for the commercial fishers in Norway, both vessel owners and in the big vessels and the small scale fishers, and also crew members of the fishing vessels. So we try to make life as easy as possible for the fishers. And of course, our members depend on healthy ecosystems and healthy stocks. That's kind of our business model. Without healthy ecosystems, there won't be any fish to fish anymore. So we do a lot of work trying to conserve nature as good as possible. And I thought I would just highlight quickly 2 examples. We have just finished our second round of the management plan against marine litter, and especially biodegradable gear to prevent ghost fishing. We do a lot of different projects and work when it comes to ghost fishing and biodegradable gear. And we are also concerned about bycatch and the Marsis project that you got presented earlier. And we also have another project trying to monitor the bycatch of seabird in the lump fisheries, which is a fishery with, in some areas, quite a lot of bycatch of seabirds. And we also do formal inputs for the management plans that Øystein was presenting earlier, and the project that IMR has now with the the candidates for the marine protected areas. We will do formal inputs to, and try to do some kind of lobby as well, although not as much as you do, I guess.
All right, wonderful. So now you know who's here, and it gives a little bit of a context. And then we're going to start with a very broad question. What do you think the role of corporations are in terms of reducing or halting and reversing biodiversity loss? Do you want to start, Ida?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Sudun. So, first of all, just to say, and also repeating Laura, who's been introducing Equinor earlier, that we do acknowledge and support the global ambitions of reversing nature loss by 2030, and we are definitely ready to play our part. And I think understanding how big a change this is and the need of urgency, we all need to contribute to it. And for Equinor, I guess playing a role here means that we really need to work on how we can evaluate all our activity in a good and conscious way. We need to continue working with risk assessment, environmental impact assessments, and really to base decisions on knowledge and understanding. We've been doing this for a long time and using the mitigation hierarchy that you already mentioned and trying to avoid impact and also minimize the impact we can't avoid. But we really need to strengthen this work. And I think in addition also understanding better how we can contribute positively is something that we really need to focus on going forward. And I guess the industry has an important role in financing research and also what Hans Christian talked about, actually stepping up and implement the measures, which is a big challenge to get the research into action and see the pilot projects actually becoming real.
Good. So you're talking about an internal role, but also very much an external role beyond the reach of your own company.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Next one.
As I mentioned a bit earlier, I think what we do is we try to set the example for the industry. Examples being that we are not running on heavy fuel oil on our ships. We stopped that many years ago, and this we did that way before we were asked to do so. So trying to be proactive, being ahead, pushing for the national requirements to be stricter, which I will get back to, and also cooperating with local companies along the coast. We are cooperating with several seaweed farms. We are replacing our fish farm salmon with a Pacific salmon that is intruding species in Norway. So we're getting that's something that we do. We use a lot of the sea urchins was mentioned here. That's on our menu. So even though it's not that many, we still serve it, and it's a delicacy. So,
did you feed it first?
Well, the ones we get have been fed because they're quite full. And this not only does it help the environment of our coast but it also helps local industries that are trying and putting money into these kind of small businesses that they start, and we have a huge impact for them that we can bring their produce on board our ships, and the guests can actually appreciate these things that's doing both good and at the same time taste good. So I think there was on the news just the other day about the Oslo Fjord and the seaweed farm there and everything. Well, there are several seaweed farms in Lyngen and in Lofoten already that is producing quite a lot of this. So I think that's how we can push. We can show when we go to conferences with the rest of the cruise industry that comes to Norway, we can show what we do, what we recommend that they would do, and then obviously we have some requirements. You said that it's not easy, but there are a couple of things we can do that's easy. But it requires some government to interact and to make the rules. I will give you one example. In Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, they've banned open loop scrubbers 1st of July 2025. Scrubbers, what they do, for those who doesn't know, is that the ships are running on heavy fuel oil, but there's too much sulfur in the fuel. So in order to avoid that, because the requirements how much sulfur you can put into the air, they put in so-called scrubbers, which basically what they do, they add chemicals, then they dilute the sulfur that drops down to a tank, they dilute it with seawater, and then they pump it into the ocean. So if you have problems in the Oslo fjord, that's clearly contributing to that problem. So here Norway should be much stricter than they are, in my opinion. We have, the only exemption we have is in the World Heritage Fjords. That's the only place. And also the second thing, grey water, black water, which is basically things coming from your shower or from your toilets. In Norway, you can pump that out without being treated 300 meters of land. I've sailed all over the world, and I've never seen these lenient restrictions anywhere else. That is a challenge. We have treatment systems on our ships. We invested in them. We're using them. We didn't have to, but we did, because it's the right thing to do. So just a little bit of a
some inspiration for Øystein
so
here.
Some things we could do that would help.
Yeah.
We could start with, yes.
Wonderful. Vicky, what do you think the role of industries is in preventing and restoring biodiversity loss?
Industry has a huge role. Each of these industries that you guys are representing, right? Shipping, transportation, fishing, food, energy. It's all stuff that we need as well, right? So we have to figure this out. But then it's just a question of how do we do this in the way that's as minimally negatively impactful as possible, right? And you were talking, somebody was talking before about, nature positive, net positive. Yes, as a minimum, I think it was you who was talking about the net positive. As a minimum, we need to make sure that, we're up there so we're net positive. But again, in order for us to bend this curve, honestly, we need to be nature positive. We have to go beyond that, right? So again, it's this question of how much we're doing and if that's enough. And I think for some companies and for some industries, it is going to be a question of almost their core business, right? This is really demanding. How do we do on this? Do I need to shift completely and look at different ways of doing things, going towards more circular economies, whether it's, whatever it might be. WWF has been working for a long time together with IKEA, for example. You can say all kinds of good and bad things about IKEA. We won't get into that. But, obviously their core business is about, buy more furniture from us. They've had a long journey over the years as well about, how do they decrease the amount of wood that's needed in their products to how do we reuse and recycle and how do we have that? They've created these, secondhand markets more and really trying to change their business model. Again, is it fast enough? Whatever, we're not going to get into that. But, really these sort of these existential questions that I think all of us need to be asking. So absolutely, industry has a huge role in this, but I just want to say again, I don't think it's on industry alone, right? It needs the help from research to help them find out what's the best way of doing it. It needs help from governments to be able to create the right incentives and possibilities and legislations and all that sort of thing. It needs consumers to be willing to pay extra money for these, it's really a whole society responsibility.
Good. Maria, do you want to say something?
I think industry absolutely has a role in driving innovation forward to conserve nature. For the fishers, I think there's kind of a twofold thing. One is the operational level, the everyday thing that you do out when you're fishing. You try to avoid coral reefs and you go for the areas where the juvenile fish is not at that time. And if you encounter an area and you fish too much juvenile fish, the area will actually be closed. So then other boats will not be allowed to go fishing in that area for a certain amount of time. And I think there's also another aspect where the fishers can contribute, and that is giving advice and wishes for gear improvements to the producers of fishing gear, both in producing more selective fishing gear or biodegradable nets to prevent ghost fishing. That could be both being in research groups, telling what they need, or they can tell the producers that, hey, what about if you do some adjustments on your products? I think it will be more sustainable or more selective, or whatever costs you want to improve. So I definitely think that the fishers have opportunity to contribute to conserving nature.
Good. So broad responsibilities, that's basically what you're all saying. But Gary, you touched upon regulations, and you seem not so impressed with some of the regulations. And I said at the beginning that the European companies have become front runners because of sustainability regulation. That doesn't mean that they're doing great, because it depends on how strict the regulations are. And I talked actually to Øystein quickly before coming into this meeting, because there is a target 15 in the Global Biodiversity Framework that says, and I quote, that the country should take legal, administrative, policy measures to encourage and enable business, in particular large and transnational companies and financial institutions, to do a lot of things, but also to reduce negative impact and increase their positive impact. So the framework has placed a responsibility on the countries to make sure that this is fostered. So I just want to bring that into, and we talked a little bit about how much has actually happened in terms of that target, and not so much yet, perhaps, but hopefully it's coming. But just how big of a driver is regulations for the work that you do? And do you think it appropriately fosters the nature action that we need? I think you kind of answered the last one already, Gary, but you get a new chance. Who wants to go first? We don't have to go in like the strict row here.
No, I can start. Well, first of all...
And also, Ida, while you're at it, can you just also say, are there any other drivers that are important for the actions that Equinor take in addition to the regulatory incentives or lack of incentives, if you think so?
Yeah, do that. Well, first of all, I think that we do have a common understanding of the need for action and the need for positive measures. And I think that regulations definitely do foster that and support that. I think it's important that we work together, the industry and authorities, to make sure that we get efficient regulations that have that actually drives the right measures and work the way they are thought. But I also think that industry needs to be proactive, and we can't only lead on regulations. And I think that it's important that we keep looking for solutions and try to improve in addition to complying with regulations. For Equinor, I think we have had some good examples of that. Laura mentioned earlier the biodiversity position that we published, I think it's about 4 years ago now, trying to move towards nature positive and contributing to nature positive. And even though it is probably a bit more difficult to actually implement than we first thought, we are working very much on it. You also mentioned other key drivers for our work on nature positive. I think just like the common understanding of the need for action and urgency is definitely a key driver. But we also have clear expectations from our main owner, the Norwegian state, that we need to understand the consequences of our activities and also prevent and reduce the impact. But in addition, also look for enhancement opportunities and ways on how we can contribute to nature positive. So that is definitely a key driver for us in Equinor. And I think also for the industry as a whole, understanding the consequences of the nature loss and the ecosystem collapse that we are facing, and that the consequences can have really high effect on future possibilities and society as a whole is an important driver for collaborating on this work.
Good. Gary?
I mean, maritime industry is obviously very regulated. I mean, I don't think anyone else is being audited as frequently as we are from both domestic and international, both port state and class societies, etc. But obviously, the challenge, what we are looking for, is we want the regulations to make sure that we are competing on fair grounds, that we are competing on equal terms when we operate on the Norwegian coast. So currently, it's by doing what we decided to do or doing how we operate is costing more to do compared to some of our competitors. Unfortunately, so far, we don't see enough willingness amongst our customers to pay a premium because we're more sustainable than our competitors. I think that generations to come will be more focused on that. I have a 20-year-old daughter. She's much more focused on the environment than I ever was, and what it's going to look like in the future. So I think we're getting there, but still, that's not the first thing they look for when they book sailing with a passenger ship, unfortunately. So I think we have quite a lot we can do with the regulatory framework, and then this needs to be systems. We have a very good system for emissions in Norway. We have this so-called NOx fund, which basically all the operators on the coast pay money into this fund, and then if you do any technical upgrades to your ship that reduces your NOx emissions, you get money back from that fund. Now, with all these new requirements coming in for fuel right now, there's EU ETS, Fuel EU Maritime, a lot for emissions. We could do something similar, with the CO2. And you can do something similar with biodiversity as well, with certain things, so that you can get some money back to do the investments that you need to do to still be competitive, but still develop the technology to where we have a project on a ship that's zero emission, or is a carbon neutral ship, fully electric, Hurtigruten. We can build that, that's no problem. But I need the infrastructure to do so. And financially, it's not, I won't get the owners of our company to agree on spending that much money on that ship versus a standard ship. So it's a little bit of, we want the regulations to push us, and we want to see continuous improvement, which is part of what we do. And then we also want to see that there's a fair common ground for competition on the in the product that we are operating, in the area we are operating.
So you're pointing to the lack of regulations and volunteer actions, sort of meeting challenges in the sense that you don't have an even playing field.
Yeah, we
anymore.
are, because I mean, if you look at our competitors on the coast, they come in with different nationality crew, which is, I mean, that's one thing. They are obviously not paid as much as Norwegian employees that we have. They have all other regulations for the fuel they can run on, which is a lot cheaper than we have. So there's a lot of these things that we would like to see that is the same for everyone operating globally, but also on the Norwegian coast. So that's kind of where we see we're lacking. We believe we're lacking a little bit of movement in the right direction.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's come back to barriers, but if Vicky and Maria wants to say a few words about drivers as well, let's hear from them too.
Yeah, I'm just going to build on what you were talking about, and having that fair playing ground, which is a huge barrier, absolutely. And what I would love to see, and I know that I think each of you guys are engaged in this as well, is being that proactive force and trying to influence policy and regulations as well, right? Not just sitting there and waiting and seeing what happens, and then, okay, we have to live with this, but being those front runners and challenging and saying, this can be done, look, this is what we need, and forcing everybody else to follow along, right? So that's a really important one. I think you guys have a big role to do that, and to be quite honest, I think that governments listen to you much more than they listen to us. So I think that, for you guys to push this is great. But I would also like to almost take a step back from all of this and also just challenge all of us about what perspective we're looking at when we're talking about industries, when we're talking about, all of these things. I think you were saying as well that, yeah, the Norwegian government is the owner of Equinor, and that they have strong requirements on you guys to make sure that you minimize impacts. I would almost want that to be reframed in a different way, and not just saying, do as little impact as you can, but saying, we need you to be working within nature's boundaries, right? And acknowledging really that we are living in a finite system, and that there are boundaries to that. I think many people are probably aware of the studies that have been done around the planetary boundaries, and where I think we've exceeded already 6 out of 9 of them or something along those lines. But like that sort of a thinking, right? Is nature there as simply as a resource for our use and for us to take and do as much as we want? No, of course not, right? So are we living from nature, or are we living in nature, and that's a broader perspective? Or are we living as a part of nature? All of these sorts of things. So, I would love, Øystein, I love the maps that you were showing, right? And really showing us, this is what we know. Industry needs to fit within this. That has got to be the boundary that we're talking about, right? That should be the framing.
Good. Maria.
First, I just want to support your what you said about the grey water and the Oslo fjord. I think that's a really important point for the Oslo fjord. Started with that one. Yes, it is. And also the fairgrounds perspective is the same for the fishing industry as well. You can go buy fuel in another country and avoid the extra taxes, which makes it not really fair ground.
And also not very environmentally friendly if you're traveling longer.
Absolutely not. But I think regarding the regulatory framework, the Norwegian fishing industry is really well regulated and managed by the Fishery Directorate. There's a whole lot of regulations to take care of and be aware of when you go fishing in Norwegian waters, which is good. And I think it's a driver for an important driver. But what I was planning on saying was that I think I wanted to highlight the growing attention from the financial sector in the fishing industry as well as an important driver for the coming years. Due to the CSRD, I can't remember who talked. Someone mentioned it. Yeah, you mentioned it earlier today, which is also now a growing attention in our industry. I think that it's going to be really important. Yeah. And I also thought about market and standards. There's some standards like environmental standards that you can have for your fisheries, which give you a certificate that it's been harvested in a sustainable way. I think growing attention on the standards and the targets that you have to achieve to obtain the certificates is important for our industry. And right now we just lost the certificate on lumpfish, or among others, lumpfish is one of them, due to bycatch. So that's one thing we are really working harder now to get a hold on the bycatch. So we can get the certificate back, because if you have the certificate, then you will have a totally different market for the fish.
Good. Time runs really fast, so I'm going to encourage you to spend a little less time when you respond to the questions. But we're going to pick up on the barriers that you started talking about, Gary. And so I'm just going to encourage you to all go and list your 3 biggest barriers, and this is for the corporations only. So Equinor and Hurtigruten and Fiskarlaget, which is sort of not a corporation, but you support the industry. Just keywords. 3 biggest the 3 biggest barriers, because you all sound so positive. You all sound like we can do so much and we're engaged in so much. But is it still how do we really get as much done as we need to get done? What's stopping you from reaching goals that you have in this field? Just like keywords. 3 biggest barriers.
Okay, I just want to start with repeating Vicky earlier, saying that, okay, we've been working with climate change for some time. Now we discovered nature as a big challenge, but working in the marine environment is even a layer on top of that.
Yes,
so
true.
that's definitely one of our biggest challenges, and that relating to like just gathering knowledge about the marine environment requires really expensive surveys, new technology, which is a big challenge. But I would also mention that like having good nature accounting systems, like having metrics and indicators for actually measuring both our impact but also positive measures, and do we really contribute positively with the measures that are implemented?
So to be able to know that you're moving in the right direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe as a last point, and I think what I also repeated earlier about Hans Christian saying that we need to move from research to actually implementing the actions and scaling up is also a big challenge, because we have been doing a lot of research on nature positive, and we are collaborating with many research institutes and gaining knowledge on it. But we also need to see action. We need to implement the measures that we try to develop.
Gary?
I think I mentioned most of that. I think one obviously is regulatory requirements. I think they should be stricter in Norway, to be honest. So we have an equal playing field with our competitors, which I believe it's a no-brainer in my opinion. And then I think there is one thing I wanted to mention is the fact that I think sometimes now there's a lot of researchers here, but the researchers and us, the operators, we speak different languages. A lot of times, and that creates a little bit of a barrier that we don't need. We want to support you. We are collecting information on one of our ships. I checked now, but we want to do it on more ships. We're doing ships to go to Svalbard. We can get that equipment on board, and we can collect data as much as you like. And then we need to see the reports in the form that we understand what we can do with what we see. And I think that could take us a big step in the right direction if we really understood this a little bit better. And I'm not going to say that our operations are dumb, but I think sometimes you need to dumb it down a little bit for us to understand it, to be honest. And I think that would help us a lot if we could. So, having closer dialogue with the researchers and the institutes, I think is something we can get better at. And I think that would help us a lot in the way we move forward. And then obviously there is a financial side to everything. And there is a financial side to this as well. If you want us to go above and beyond and get those really modern, zero-emission, carbon-neutral ships with no emissions, nothing going out in the air or in the ocean or whatever, it's going to cost a lot of money. And I need a lot of infrastructure. And also there's a big barrier in Norway's infrastructure. We know that with you want to do shore connections. I can just as an example, we're plugging in the ships to stop the engines. We go to 34 different ports, and right now there are 3 ports we can connect. And we've had this connection on board since 2017. So that's, to me, also a big barrier. We need, to make sure that we have the infrastructure and it's financially viable for us to go where we want to go.
Maria?
Totally agree in the last one. I was thinking of the lack of knowledge of cumulative impacts and the fragmented governance or the sector-by-sector measurements that we operate within today is a big barrier. And I also think the importance of dumb it down a bit also is relevant for my sector, and also the implementation of measures. At least it's the security on board the vessel is priority number one, and sometimes you see suggestions for measures that they maybe don't really understand how life is on board, and the measures is not really practical or safe. And that's also a barrier, and it's difficult because then we think they are dumb and they think we are dumb, and then the communication is not really working that good.
Yeah, and I think that's really true because it's not just one way, right? It goes the other way as well. It's very difficult for researchers to understand business language as well and to understand the framework that you work within. So actually, what I hear here is that I hear regulatory questions, I hear funding, I hear lack of knowledge, and communication. And I want to dwell on the last one a little bit, I think, because this really is a challenging topic. How do we understand each other? How do we move in a direction together? So who do you need to collaborate with to reach the targets that you have and perhaps even push yourself further? And how can we get around this language issue? Is it just a question of spending more time together so that we understand each other, or is it something else? You know, is there like a button we can press somewhere? You certainly look like you wanted to start, Maria.
Well, this is something we have been talking a lot about because sometimes we in the administration of the organization participates in research projects, for example.
Yep.
And we can give information about how life is on board and how the fishery works, and if it's a research project, obviously the researchers don't know that much about fisheries as we do.
Exactly.
So that's really, I think that it's really important to have a closer connection in the projects, and not always only with the people in the administration like me, but also sometimes we talk to our members and they join the project themselves, so the researchers might be able to come on board and do the testing in a real fishing vessel together with the fishers instead of in a research vessel together with researchers.
Yeah.
I think that is a key.
I think I'll take one more person to respond to this. Vicky, you want to go?
I would love to see more collaboration, and I know that we've heard examples of different projects, and where you have industry working together with researchers or with and that sort of thing. What I think we need to do is have more collaboration across sectors, multi-sectoral, and looking more from the ecosystem scale.
Yeah.
Right? And I think you were talking about this before as well, the cumulative effects of things, right? And for us to be realizing this, oceans, you were saying, is even more complicated. Yes, because they are so interconnected. They are so complex, right? So we're all in this together, right? So we need to be able to have those dialogues and collaborations, not only between industry and research, industry and government, but also across sectors.
Wonderful. And then there's a topic that's linked to this, not understanding each other, and that is the topic of greenwashing. So I'm going to pass the word on to you, Ida, and sort of think, how much of this is greenwashing something, or like a fear of being accused of greenwashing? Is that something that you spend time discussing internally? To what extent do you think it is impacted by not understanding each other and not sending enough information in different directions? Or is it just some reflections on that, and also from Getty or someone else if you have something?
Yeah, I think greenwashing is definitely a real and constant challenge to us, and something we do talk a lot about. I think it's also, it can be a barrier to action because it can make us concerned about what we put into action. I think it's also a challenge that it can make us not being brave enough to share data and to share and to be open. And I think really being open and communicating, talking to each other is really a key to find new solutions. And I do definitely think that greenwashing accusations can be challenging that. I guess we do really need to dare to fail to be able to improve. Yeah. And if we are not, if you're too afraid to put ourselves out there and actually try to test the measures that we have developed, then we won't be able to improve. So I think greenwashing is definitely a topic that is of concern and can be a challenge to this.
And I think this piloting thing is very important. Hans Christian said something about that there are solutions that you've tested that work somewhere, but they don't work in a different setting. So really that is the core of restoration. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it partially succeeds. And that has to do with some lack of knowledge, but also the complexity of the ecosystems. So it's not straightforward. And we do need that piloting, and it cannot be stopped, as you say, by... we need to really get the pilots out there. But any other thoughts on this greenwashing? Because the mitigation hierarchy, it very clearly says you have to do, clean your own house first, and then you can do other things. But someone touched upon it earlier in this conversation that there are a lot of restoration projects that need to happen, and we do know that public budgets are getting tighter. So who's going to fund that? Are the industry is that a role for them? And how does that fit into this? How do you balance your portfolios in terms of prevention and restoration? And does any sort of greenwashing thoughts come into play in that balancing act? Vicky?
Surprise, surprise, I have some thoughts, some opinions on this one as well. No, I mean, I think that, to me, those are two very different things, honestly. Piloting ideas, testing them, daring to fail, trying those, that's a no-brainer. Everybody can and should always be able to do that, right? And be able to talk about, well, we tried this didn't work, what can we learn from that? And I don't think there's any shame in that whatsoever. I think that it's a very positive thing. That's a different thing. For me, the greenwashing thing is about what you were just talking about, that balance between what are your impacts versus what are these positives, right? And how much you are communicating with others. Industries do have negative impacts. They almost all do, right? That's an unfortunate reality of it. But again, it's this communicating of your intentions, of your awareness of this, and saying, yes, we know this, and we're working to try to pivot this one, and this is our key thing, and it's a really big, heavy thing, right? If this one is too big and people feel like you're just keeping on going with it and not doing anything, and then you're doing a few of these pilot projects. Again, those are two very different things, and I'm not surprised that there would be greenwashing, right? But so it's about showing that, I'm looking at our entirety about this, from the avoiding on what needs to be done, but then also then these actions that we can do to try to help also positively towards industry.
Any other thoughts?
Just to comment, and I think it's a lot about communication, as you say, because we do very much focus on the mitigation hierarchy and working to avoid and minimize, and be able to communicate that the actions that we do towards nature positive is in addition. It's not always that easy, but I think it's a lot about being open and showing what we are doing, not forgetting about the avoiding and minimizing, even though we are also looking into positive measures.
We are out of time. I'm allowing myself one more question. And that is, if you could change one thing that could make you do more for biodiversity, what would it be? If anything was within your reach, what would it be? Maria.
Then I would change. This is quite a boring answer, actually, because this is something we've been working on for quite a while. But we have been trying...
Boring is good sometimes.
We have been trying to... every fisher has to report their catch every day. And this is done electronically. And it goes to the Directorate of Fisheries. And as per now, you could deliver your catch or report on the day of the catch of the day without reporting by catch. So we have been urging to change the reporting system so that it should be mandatory to also report your bycatch before you can actually press the send button at the end of the day. And we have been working for this now for over a year, and it's still not happening anything in the Directorate of Fisheries. So I would like to change that one.
Good. Vicky, one thing you can change.
Okay, one thing. This isn't close to as concrete as yours is. It's complete opposite, in fact. What I would want to change is our relationship with nature. how we see our relationship with nature, and that we are more a part of nature. Because I think that if we can make a shift towards that, all of these other bits will fall closer into place.
Good. Gary?
I think if I could, I would love to see that we had the infrastructure on land that I could stop any discharges from the ships to the ocean, which is possible. It's possible today.
Yeah.
But we just need to have the facilities where we can offload this. It doesn't have to cost $1 million every time you want to send something ashore. But if that's doable already. But, so I think it's not a difficult task, to be honest. But it takes someone that needs to make a decision on it, and then give us the money to be able to operate and be competitive, but still doing the right thing.
Wonderful. Ida?
Yeah, it's a difficult question and many good answers, and I guess it's easy to go to the financial part. But I think I would say that for me, I would like to change the access to data and the open sharing of data, and to have one place where we can all get access to all the data we have about nature. That would be a dream.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Let's give them a hand of applause. And thank you to Equinor for hosting this event. I hope you leave a little bit more aware and hopefully a little more hopeful. And to leave you with a piece of good news, we've heard about the Nature Panel today, or the IPBES. We've heard about climate change and the IPCC. Today is the first day of the first meeting of the panel on chemicals and pollution. So it's an important day. And remember, that's reason number 4 for biodiversity loss. So good luck to all the companies moving forward. Good luck to researchers in training their communication, and to everyone else to just collaborate more. Thank you so much.